The haunting on Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge had witnessed millions of footsteps over more than a century. During the day, it was lively with crowds of people and vehicles, connecting Manhattan and Brooklyn in an unending rhythm. But at night, the Brooklyn Bridge transformed into a different world. Legends spoke of shadowy figures drifting in the mist, sighs echoing from the arches, and spirits left behind in the past. Some claimed these were only myths. But to Jake, they felt real. Jake was a young photographer fascinated by the supernatural. On Halloween night, he decided to visit the bridge, hoping to capture some eerie images. He was drawn to the stories of the lady in white, a restless spirit said to have died during the bridge's construction. Locals said that on foggy nights, she would appear like a floating silhouette, trapped in an endless search for release from her pain. The night was bitterly cold, and the wind from the river howled. As Jake stepped onto the bridge, he felt an eerie silence settling over him. The usual city sounds seemed muted, leaving an unsettling void. A hint of anxiety crept into his mind. But his curiosity outweighed his fear. His footsteps echoed against the metal walkway. In the distance, car headlights flickered, casting shadows that twisted like they were alive. Suddenly, he noticed a faint figure emerging into view, a woman standing silently near the railing, dressed in a long white gown, her hair floating as if held by an unseen breeze. "Hello," Jake called, his voice swallowed by the silence. The woman didn't turn. She stood there, motionless, her face hidden in shadow. Jake took a deep breath, raised his camera, and clicked the shutter. The flash illuminated the mist for a brief moment, and when he checked his screen, he saw the woman, but not just as a faint blur. Her eyes stared back at him, hollow, her mouth twisted in a silent scream. Her pale, frozen face reflected an endless sorrow. Jake's heart pounded as he realized he was not alone. The mist thickened around him, becoming so dense that he could barely see a few steps ahead. Suddenly, a bone-chilling hand rested on his shoulder, pressing down with an invisible force. He spun around but saw no one. Yet, the weight of the hand remained, icy and unyielding. A faint whisper floated through the mist, like the sound of wind, "Help me." The short plea carried a deep pain, sending a wave of terror through Jake. Caught in paralyzing fear, Jake tried to run, but each step felt heavier, as though something was holding him back. The bridge's iron arches, once sturdy and solid, now seemed like dark, looming figures, stretching toward him. He ran, but it felt as if the bridge itself didn't want to let him escape. In desperation, Jake stopped, frantically taking photos in every direction, hoping the flash would dispel the darkness. But each photo became more haunting. Distorted faces appeared in the mist, wide, unblinking eyes, and the lady in white drawing closer in each frame. Her face shifted from despair to menace, her empty eyes filled with hatred, as though she had found someone to drag into the abyss with her. Jake tried to scream, but the mist swallowed his voice. Exhausted, he felt his strength draining away. Strange memories, ones that didn't belong to him, flashed in his mind. A young woman on the bridge, laughing with a man beside her in the rain. Then a storm arrived, and she was swept over the railing, her last look filled with betrayal and despair. The feeling of loss, sorrow and resentment surged through Jake, as though he was sharing in the spirit's agony. For a brief moment, he saw her clearly, standing before him. Her pale face, empty eyes, her hand outstretched, ready to pull him into eternal darkness. And then, everything went black. The next morning, police found Jake's camera on the bridge. But there was no trace of him. The last photo on the camera showed the haunting face of the lady in white, her eyes staring into the viewer's soul. A silent warning. Those who cross the Brooklyn Bridge on misty nights still say that sometimes they hear a soft whisper calling for help. Some even claim to see a young photographer standing alongside the lady in white, forever trapped between worlds.